Sir, kindly introduce yourself for this interview.
I'm Prasun Banerjee. By profession, I'm a policeman. And my passion includes writing, filmmaking, cricket, analyzing legal and socio-legal issues, everything that has got some impact on the contemporary world. In a word, I'm in love with my life and the world around.
Okay, but sir, your being just a policeman is just a kind of an understatement. So you are the DIG of Dakshin Dinajpur and Malda ranges. So basically, what is your experience of working in these districts as a police officer of the highest rank?
Well, I would not say highest. I would say that I have been at the cutting edge level, at a higher plane of the cutting edge level for some time. I was SP of 2 districts. But I sincerely believe that a policeman in uniform is a policeman, and the job is almost the same. The higher you go, you are more into the planning and execution of the thing, and at the lower rank, maybe you are mostly into execution. This is the typical geographical entity, this gold bongo as we call it. I've worked last couple of years here. Fascinating experience because this is slightly different from the typical South Bengal, slightly in a different mode than the typical North Bengal of Alipurduar and Jalpaiguri, though technically it falls under North Bengal. But this part has a very interesting and unique entity, linguistically, socially and economically. So overall, it has been a fascinating journey as a policeman.
But sir, how do you manage to find time out of your busy schedule to make films and everything? Because you are also a very well-decorated filmmaker. So how do you manage the time out of your busy schedule?
When there is a will, there is a way.
So would you like to elaborate, please?
You see, you have to pursue your passion as well because you don't live twice on this earth. And people have different, as you say, hobbies of taking oneself off from the core profession.
So do you think, are you saying that your filmmaking is your hobby or is it another
passion,
kind of a
I would say a
profession?
passion, a hobby, passion, everything combined together. Filmmaking is a composite art, and for me it has been a composite expression of myself, I can say. That whatever I have seen, gathered experiences, seen the world around me, I try to express and compress all these experiences into a capsule, and my films are basically reflections of my experience with the world.
So do you think that yours being from South Bengal has got something something special to do with your filmmaking, that you have got some more opportunities than the filmmakers in Northern Bengal in the general sense of the term? Because you are not an inhabitant of Northern Bengal as such. You have come from Kolkata.
I have become.
You have right now become, but do you think that yours being from Southern Bengal have given you much more exposure?
Well, you don't have a control over the place where you were born.
Yeah.
So.
No, but do you think that there are some added advantages?
Yes, I was born and brought up around Calcutta and mostly Barakpur.
Yeah.
And Calcutta then
And Barakpur has also got a very rich heritage, as it seems.
Yes, it has got a beautiful city, Bhushan Bandyopadhyay, Surendra Banerjee. It has a rich cultural tradition, you can say.
Okay.
Having said that, well, you see, Calcutta quintessentially is the center of all cultural activities, whether we like it or not, for several reasons.
Yeah.
And for that matter, every capital is. You got to have more studios in Calcutta, you have more artists in Kolkata, you have technical facilities galore there. You can't have these facilities in the districts. But what I have tried to do is just to make optimum use of the resources of the things around. Wherever I have found that I really want to take the help of the Kolkata techniques, technologies, manpower, etc., then only I try to rope in those resources. So my films have been a combination of the resources of North Bengal, mostly artists who have been from North Bengal. Well, but I have tried to utilize Calcutta resources as well, particularly for the editing, technical aspect, sound designing. Well, these are the parts where Calcutta definitely is way ahead of North Bengal.
So how we are going to categorize you, as a filmmaker who is from Northern Bengal, or as a filmmaker who is from Southern Bengal, or as a filmmaker of West Bengal?
Quintessentially Bengali, so a filmmaker of West Bengal, a filmmaker of West Bengal who by birth belongs to Southern Bengal, but the heart belongs to North Bengal.
Okay, that's a very interesting answer, sir. And so, as far as I remember, that you were also catapulted into the social scene by making your documentary on your, to say, kind of providing relief for during the 2017 flood in Northern Bengal.
Yeah, there was a devastating flood in 2017 in South Dinajpur, Malda, and parts of North Dinajpur as well.
So, do you think that the flood actually affected your urge to become a documentary filmmaker or a journal filmmaker in any way?
No, not really. When the flood actually happened, my role was restricted only to relief and rescue work as the SP of the district.
Okay. But documentation is very important, isn't it, sir?
Documentation also I didn't do consciously. In fact, the documentary was made by a guy called Ritik Shah.
Yeah.
And he did not have access to much footage, whatever he did later on.
Okay.
What he did that basically he collected footage. You will see that mostly the footages are inadequate.
Yeah.
Not a proper footage.
Okay.
There was no plan. The situation was so bad, nobody was thinking of making a documentary.
Yeah.
It all happened later on when the water got receded. Life was limping back to normalcy to some extent.
But it has actually, what to say, kind of given impetus to many people to come forward to help the water stranded people.
I'm glad about that. That people participated. You see, unless and until people join hands, it is not possible for any administration in the entire world, from America to Bangladesh, to do everything on their own. Because ultimately administration is the people, for the people, and by the people. The people's participation is always welcome, important, and it makes all the difference, as it did in 2017 flood when the common men jumped onto the bandwagon. They just joined hands, and it was, we can say that it has had some sort of multiplier effect. When people come forward, then you have more hands that are feeding. You have more eyes that are watching. You are getting more information. Your only job is to just to accommodate or to appreciate all these findings. Make good use of those people, because you see the advantage with the administration of police is that it's a disciplined force.
Yeah.
So they know how to channelize the energy, how to channelize the manpower, how to channelize the abundant emotion that is working there. But unless until you are harnessing that emotion, you are channelizing that energy in the right direction, that will be wasted. So that was our job. Once there were plethora of persons joining into the bandwagon, distributing them the areas where they would work, providing them with basic vehicles, how they will go, maybe in some cases some materials that they will take and they will distribute. All these things need to be planned beautifully, and that probably we could do successfully. So we got benefit of the people's participation. Otherwise it would be chaos. More people joining hands with no leadership, guiding them how to work, would lead to a chaos. So that could be avoided. People's participation was beautifully channelized. Administration worked hard. As a leader of the force, I was in the field for several days.
You were actually leading from the front, as I have seen the documentary, that it was also kind of making the concept of policemen in uniform becoming closer to common people, and I think that it was very inspiring for the common people also. So what's your take on future? Would you like to provide relief in the future operations also, and inspire people to come together and join hands with the police forces?
Well, it has been a great learning process. First time in my life, I have seen such devastated flood. As most of the other policemen, the magnitude was huge.
Yeah, it was severe. Yeah,
it was severe. The magnitude was huge, and I always believe that the essence of every administration is common sense. I got tremendous support from my higher ups from the government. It was a teamwork again, the civil administration, the medical units, etc., the engineering sections all joined hands. But well, somebody had to take the initiative. Somebody had to break the shackle, break the grammar, break the rule book. That probably we could do there. And at the end of the, suppose, for example, then when the flood first hit the adjoining areas of the town.
Once again, just a few days before, you were once again leading from the front by providing relief material to the people stranded around.
It was a flood-like situation, not a full-fledged flood, I would say. It was a flood-like situation, but was threatening to go out of control.
Yeah.
But thankfully, the rain stopped and the water receded.
Okay.
Yes, we were taking no chances. Basically, what I wanted to do is that to take a stock of the situation, because once the areas get cut off due to flood in this region, then it becomes very difficult to reach and plan. So I was just trying to make an on-the-spot assessment at what is going to happen, and that assessment, it was basically, and of course when we are going, some relief materials were carried, but it was, I would not say that it was a situation where relief was very, very necessary. But in 2017 flood, for days it was seriously, I would say, threatening.
Okay. And so, do you think that your film has got the documentary that was actually shot by Ritik Shah during your flood relief operations? Would it have any kind of, what to say, kind of utilization in the European or American perspectives?
Okay. First of all, let me just give you one small rejoinder. That is, it was not planfully shot.
Yeah.
He collated the footages and well made good use of it. And the concept is good. Maybe he even has drawn footage from the social media, etc., etc. Overall, what he could do, what I've seen the documentary. In fact, he interviewed me also.
And I have also seen it, and it was magnificent watching you in action.
So the point is that, well, if we consider from the American perspective, European perspective, I would say that it is a good example of how administration should work in disaster management.
Yeah.
We know that the America and the Europe, they often all countries face flood, storm, etc. Now,
and US is almost always ravaged by cyclones and everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I don't have first-hand experience of working in US, but I had a training session in United Nations in Europe, in Italy and Croatia. So I have seen that Indian police, I would say, are far more committed, far more involved in the social process than what they are. I'm not undermining their efforts. I'm just saying that the work culture, we handle more people. We in India, you have less number of policemen per lakh population compared to America or Japan.
Yeah.
Our interaction with the people are more emotional. Our bonding is much more stronger.
Yeah, and thanks to your efforts, that this bond is becoming stronger day by day. Yes, sir.
Thank you. So, but I would say that what the Americans can really take away from this thing is that in spite of some resource issues, in spite of the difficulties and the challenges, the most important thing during such relief operation is the emotional quotient. It's not the IQ, it is the passion quotient, the PQ that makes all the difference. The police or the enforcing agencies got to have the passion moving him or them to go for this sort of operation, because this is something out of the rule book. No academy teaches this thing. So when you find that at 2 a.m. in the night, somebody is crying in a cut-off area, a pregnant lady who had to be shifted to hospital because she was completely marooned, and even the NDRF could not reach that place. One of my DSP ranking officer, he and one inspector ranking officer, they risked their lives and reached that place and rescued that lady. Later on, the lady belonged to an army family.
Okay.
The army colonel was posted in Kashmir. He wrote a beautiful letter to me, which I gave to the documentary maker, and he in fact incorporated the letter in the documentary. He said that it was unthinkable in a situation when National Disaster Relief Management Force, they even could not venture out because of these problems, the intensity of the water, the and the very difficult topography, then the policemen, without much specialized training, they could go and rescue. That means it was the passion, it was the
of course,
it was the emotional connect with the thing that I have to do it. That probably made all the difference, and I'm proud of as a leader that my team was absolutely motivated, and they could deliver a performance which was appreciated by the public in general.
So, are you primarily a documentary filmmaker or a feature filmmaker or short filmmaker?
You see, documentary is definitely one of my likings, but I love to tell stories.
Okay.
In that case, I would say that I am not restricted to documentary alone. I'm basically expanding, stretching onto the world of feature and shorts, telling narratives, telling stories, and giving a message through my stories.
What gave you the impetus to make feature films? And as far as I know, that you also write stories in different reputed dailies, and so you also got your plots with you. So, why do you think that you catapulted yourself into making feature films from the documentaries things?
You see,
as far as I remember, that your first documentary, which was directed exclusively by you, was the Myths of Dinajpur.
Myths of Dinajpur was a co-director.
Okay.
There was another person called Prof. Chaudhary,
Okay.
who's also a very good documentary maker.
Okay.
We did the work together.
So, what was your experience of working with Prasun Banerjee while making doing something on the Myths of Dinajpur?
In Myths of Dinajpur, we divided our works. My focus area basically was to do the research work.
Okay.
Dinajpur has a rich heritage. Myth is something where there is no documentary evidence, but it
Sir,
is.
I'm just butting in. So, do you think that this Dinajpur in film, or rather when made into a documentary, would have something to offer to the American viewers?
Certainly, because
And thereafter, we're going to come back to that question once again.
Because
and what was your experience?
whenever the Americans think of India, few things they can think of. One of them definitely is Ramayana and Mahabharata. I think every American has heard of it.
And Iliad and Odyssey also.
Surely. Now, the thing is that relics of Mahabharata, the small remnants and fragments of Mahabharata, if it is present any district of Bengal, that is Dinajpur. So, any American sitting in Washington or New York, whenever he dreams of Mahabharata, and actually where the civilization was, okay, they can go to Kurukshetra, which is close to Delhi.
Yeah, yes.
But when they come to Bengal and try to connect Mahabharata with today's world, the place they have to come in Harirampur Bahiratta. So, where the Virat kingdom was supposedly there, where the Kauravas made the political advancement, which was challenged by Virat king with the help of these Pandavas in exile. So, all these stories may be right, wrong. As I said, it's a myth. It's a myth that they were there. So, even if we consider the myth is an important part of civilization. In Americans, they also believe in their
Yes,
myths.
of course. They have got their own myths.
So, if they want to rediscover the myths of Mahabharata, they have to come to this land. That is the relevance of Dakshin Dinajpur to America through this epics.
Okay, and what's the relevance of Dinajpur to Europe, do you think?
Absolutely very relevant, because you see that Europe is a very advanced civilization, and also not only in terms of industrialization but also in terms of culture, poetry, etc. Europe must be fascinated about Kalidas. In Kalidas, you will find the mention of river Atrei, the Karotova. So, when Europe thinks of the olden golden Indian literature, this is one place, Dinajpur, which has bound to touch their imagination. I would suggest the Europeans that you come here, take a deep breath in this pure land, and take a holy bath in the Atrei Karotova, which has a mention even in Mahabharata and in Kalidasa. And it will just transform your entire thinking thought process to that era, to that level. You can imagine that, well, this was probably the land where such wonderful literature was written. This was the land which triggered a lot of interesting things historically, I think, and which shaped the India later on. So, in terms of these things, ancient history, the Dinajpur's ancient history is so rich. I would not say that the medieval and modern portion about it. I would definitely Tebhaga Andolan was a big thing.
Would you like to say something, just one or two lines about Tebhaga Andolan, because for the international students who will be watching your interview?
Surely. You see, the Tebhaga is basically Tebhaga.
Yeah.
If you break down the word, Tebhaga Andolan or Tebhaga revolution was essentially an agrarian revolution. And when did it take place? It took place in 46-47. Along with lot of other agrarian revolutions that had taken place in India during that period. What is the basic objective of the movement? The objective of the movement was that what the peasants wanted that the entire produce should be divided into 3 segments, 1, 2 and 3. The 2/3 of the produce should be with the peasants, the 1/3 should go to the landlord. But of course, landlord are subsequently to the Britishers. But of course, the government was not prepared to listen to this thing. And because Bengal had seen famine much before that, of course, this agrarian movement gathered extreme momentum in the agrarian part of Bengal, and in North Bengal, this area, Dinajpur, was one of the hotbeds of the revolution. So whenever you think of Tebhaga, it has to be agrarian. Being an agrarian civilization, this district actually took part in this revolution, and it has simply carved a place in the Indian history. And I would say that if whenever we write history, Indian history, the freedom struggle, Tebhaga movement and Balurghat will certainly occupy a considerable space.
So you are actually graduating into the level of making post-colonial films?
No, not really actually. I have never tried to do that.
Yeah.
My domain, basically, I would say that thriller, the legal thrillers.
But I detect a certain trace of post-colonial in what you are saying right now. So how did that be, kind of received by the European students who will be watching your interview?
You see, as I said, that filmmaking, for making any film, suppose you are making a film on sports, Chak De India kind. Then also,
once again, it's very post-colonial.
Yeah. Then also you have to be aware of the contemporary, the medieval and ancient India. That is the beauty of filmmaking, that you can make film of one era, of one generation, for one generation, of one generation, of one genre. But to be a filmmaker, you have to be constantly aware of the roots, the future, the past and the present. So therefore, even though I normally deal with the subjects which are contemporary in nature, but I have to be aware of the roots, the past. My take on the film is that, well, as you say, there are films which are triggered by ideological things. Like one of my very favorite films, like this Battleship Potemkin, was quintessentially guided by the 1917's revolution, the Russian Revolution, and although it's a silent film, but it speaks many languages.
And it's also one of your more favorite films as well.
Very, very favorite. This is a huge favorite. The way it has been made, the way the narrative actually goes. Without speaking a word, it speaks volume about the discontent, the mental state of the people by Tsarist oppression, and which really triggered the Russian Revolution, which essentially paved the way for Vladimir Ilyich Lenin to create that revolution at 1917. So there are, of course, very good films which have been governed or guided or triggered by some sort of ideological.
So do you think that the people of Dakshin Dinajpur are dominated, or they have been relegated to the margins in some way that you would like to show in your future films? Have they been marginalized? What do you think? while we're working on the
No. I would not put the term marginalized. I would say that you see, everybody has a way to live.
Yeah.
They have their way of living, I should say. They have their way which is unique. I respect diversity. I have seen that maybe I was born in the other part of Bengal, where people live, think and eat little differently. So this diversity is quintessentially Bengal and India. So I have found that this is very interesting. There are a lot of...
There is no marginalization.
Not at all.
Coming back to the myths of Dinajpur, what are the challenges that you were facing while you were making the film? And of course, Pardeep Chaudhary was there. So as the co-director?
You see, first of all, we did not have a good camera. All we had was one 80D camera belonging to one of our friends, Shumit Mujumdar, who happens to be a PhD student of a university.
He is also a part of your filmmaking team.
He is a very good cinematographer. Yes, he has always been the part of it.
Okay.
Even in the feature and the short films, he has always been with me. So we did not have a good camera. We had no light. So we could not shoot after the evening. So whatever shooting had to be done, we had to shoot in the daytime only. That too with a crop sensor camera. We had very limited lenses. There it happened that when we took the artists to some places, the places were not at all fit for any creative performance. So all these obstacles were there. But I always love taking challenges. I always think that unless and until you are faced with some sort of hurdles, you never jump in life. So, I believe that you only learn to swim when you have been thrown into water. So I was thrown into water, you all were thrown into water. We learned how to swim and it was made.
So how are the people cooperating when they come to learn that a film was being made on their local legends and everything?
Well, it varied from being extremely curious to over-enthusiastic. But well, as I said, that people of this district, they have a cultural bent of mind. So overall, I should say that I would rate it that I have received lots of cooperation and encouragement. People have been very supportive. By and large, well, exceptions are always there to support the law.
For the benefit of the students who will be watching your interview, could you just give a kind of review of your Weaver? What films have you made so far?
Well, after the Myths of Dinajpur, which was going to be a documentary,
Please also mention the years.
It was in 2000, I should say.
Probably it was in 2017.
17,
yeah.
Kind of, yeah. In 2018, it was selected in 9th Dadasaheb Phalke. Then I made a film on a festival of Bengal, Durga Pujo, which is also a global festival nowadays. And I thought that a small town has a different flavor of Durga Pujo. Balurghat, the district town of the South Dinajpur, definitely has something special about the Pujo. Because nowadays all the young guys and girls, they go out either for studies or to pursue their career. But during such festivals time, all of them come back. So I wrote a story, later on converted into a screenplay, basically centered around a few characters who are from this town, but left the town a couple of years back, again reunited during the puja, and then some flashbacks, some you can say that skeletons coming out of the cupboard kind of things, some past relationships which can make the present very uncertain, and still the fun, frolic, the friendship that was still existing, and shot in the backdrop of Durga Puja. It was shot Puja to Puja.
Yeah.
I started on Saptami and finished on Dashami. It was a great fun. Our entire team actually, for the whole day we were engrossed because I had to perform. I had to get out to the roads in uniform.
So you are also the director of that film?
Yeah, I directed the film. So we had to complete the shoot by 4:30 because I had my duties also waiting for me. So it was a great challenge, but we enjoyed to the hilt, and we finished this shoot, and then it took probably a bit long time for editing. Editing was done in Kolkata, sound designing, and basically we had a censor certification, and therefore it ran successfully for a week or so in a theatre. Normally what happens that in this region people make film and upload in YouTube. That is good, that is not bad, but you see, unless and until you are onto a big screen.
Yeah.
You really don't
Yeah,
know
of
how
course.
good, how bad it is. So well, it was the first film which tried to change the trend of filmmaking here.
What is the name of that film?
Cool year.
Cool, and when was it
is
released?
cool, you know.
Yeah.
And year is a Hindi term for friends. So
Okay.
this is the term nowadays is used mostly. You see, all of us have become multilingual now. So we mix and match words. So cool year basically is an expression everybody uses, be it a Bengali, be it a Marathi, be it a Punjabi. And Indians, they think Indian diaspora living every part of the nook and corner of the world. Even in America, they use this term cool year. That means, okay, it's all right, let's go ahead with life. That was the expression I wanted to make.
So how would you like to present your film Cool Year to an American student who will be watching it? So is he going to learn something from your film? Or is it just a kind of a romance or something like that?
Because what I tried to say in the film, through every film, through every story, I tried to convey a message. Through Cool Year, there was a message that this generation is much adept, much composed to handle the crisis of life than the generation that maybe compared to our generation even.
So you are for Generation Z.
Yes, the Generation Z, as you call it, the Generation Z is much more composed. People may call, okay, they're very shallow, they're not deep, they don't read, they are more into PDF than book. But whatever all said and done, these people overexposed to social media, overexposed to everything, relationships all blown to each other. Then even they have the composure to say, okay, yeah, whatever happened. Let's move forward in life. This moving forward, in spite of the jitters that come into life, that has been the message of Cool Year.
Okay.
Then I made the subsequent film that was Men Will Be Men, and which was selected into 2 festivals, one in Ukraine and another in Spain, Valencia. I was supposed to go to Europe this year, but because of COVID I could not go.
Okay.
So that was my first international selection. So I was extremely happy with that. And this is probably the first film which is running successfully on an OTT platform.
Okay.
That is Adda Times, which can be accessed globally. In American also can see this film, Men Will Be Men.
So how do you like to situate your films, the films that you have already made in the current COVID-19 situation? So how people would access your films and what would they learn from these things?
First of all, the Cool Year is on YouTube.
Okay.
People can just search. Our channel is #Dinajpur.
Okay.
So people can see the myths of Dinajpur.
I have also watched the film. Do you think that such kind of returning to normalcy is possible right now in COVID-19 situation? The film that you actually made, it was showing everything centered on Durga Puja. So people were actually assembling and they were doing this thing and that thing, and that also got some past histories that I have watched. But do you think that this film would be, kind of very much interesting to people who are right now suffering from the COVID-19 situation?
Yeah, definitely it can be a great stress buster, because people this year, I think it's a new normal situation. People won't be able to go out and make a lot of pandal hopping.
But won't that make them nostalgic? What do you think?
Certainly that would make them nostalgic, and that really I want to make them, because you see, whenever they can take the flavor of the Durga Puja watching my film, they can really go back to their adolescence. They can go back to their college life.
Okay.
They can really go to the throwback pictures of their own watching this film. At the same time, it is basically marinated with the smell of Durga Puja. So I think that during Puja, Cool Year can be again revisited.
Okay, I have also watched both of your films. So I have found that being a policeman, do you think that you are intrigued by the element of deception while filming something?
No, not really. Actually, so for the second film I made, Men and a Cool Year, basically.
There is also in Men Will Be Men, there is also a kind of deceptive activity, isn't it?
I would say that
a person who is very much afraid of expressing his feelings for someone who is working as a superior.
Well, I should say that the human mind is very complicated, and well.
So it's a psychological film.
It's a psychological romantic drama, I should say.
Okay.
Well, there is a psychological element. There is something which, of course, I would say that eternal and it happens probably in every nook and corner, be it Algeria, America, or India. main quint essentially they are little, I should say, possessive about the women.
Okay.
And there are, depending on their social strata, depending on their relative position with the woman, the expressions do vary. Now, woman, as we know that again, it's a bundle of complexities and intrigue. So in my film, I tried to deal with a situation where there is an apparent normalcy between the relationships, but nothing is normal.
Okay.
Everything had to be taken with a pinch of salt. So the cinematographer was working with the girl, her boyfriend, the celebrity. Everybody might be having some sort of infatuation about that woman, and at the end of it, the woman knew everything, but she again had to be normal, to behave normally, because she knew that again in the path of life it would continuously come and go. So this is a kind of, I should say, a psychological tussle and getting ahead with all these things that makes this film a little special, probably that has earned it to international recognition.
So men have got this this bad reputation of being polygamous. So do you think that in your film you are going to deal something with this?
Well, this is I would not say, I would not put it across like this, but I would say that, men have a tendency to go weak in the knees, and both you and me are men.
Yeah.
So,
That is why I'm asking.
Because they are not out of the ambit. So, that is always there. You can say this is a very popular cash line of an ad and of a particular beverage.
Your title of this film, Men Will Be Men, is it a kind of a resignation, or it is just a kind of a certification, or what is that?
Neither resignation nor certification, but an assertion of fact.
Assertion of fact, okay. And so what are the other projects? First of all, I would like to ask you that while making your films, you must have studied a lot about films. So what's your take on the current situation of world films? Maybe the American films, maybe the European films. What is your take on these things? In what do they stand right now in 2020?
You see, the films in America, arguably they are one of the best industries in the world. There's no gainsaying about that. Because of several factors. First of all, the infrastructure. Hollywood has developed an infrastructure which is quite enviable. Money alone cannot buy everything. This has to be evolved and developed. Tomorrow, any other country may purchase all the equipments what the Hollywood has got, and then even it would not be able to match the Hollywood standard.
Okay.
Because the culture.
What is your Hollywood standard? Would you like to elaborate?
Everything.
Okay.
You see, if you see any movie where you have multiple cast, multiple characters, and you see how many talented people are coming up every year, every day, every second in Hollywood. The standard of acting, the standard of editing, the standard of cinematography, everything is so good that this is a culture which, as I said, that had taken years to be there, to reach that level. So, only by creating machines, you can't create another Hollywood anywhere. This is first thing. Otherwise, every country would have a Hollywood by this time. Secondly, it has fab directors, definitely. So, they do continuous research and development on films. Film is a science and arts combined together. It is neither an art purely, not purely a science. It is something a hybrid. A director has to be very, very well acquainted with his camera, with the lighting, with sound, everything. At the same time, a director cannot be a videographer shooting a scene with a camera, light and sound. A director has to tell a story. At the end of the day, it's the story that matters. The story has to be well told,
of course,
well narrated. Then the director has to understand the art of acting as well. You have a good camera, your actors are underperforming, and as a director, you can't intervene, then you cannot do anything. So every director has to know a little bit of acting, or I should say understand the acting in great details, even if he is not an actor. So Hollywood has plethora of such directors who are competent in every segment of this filmmaking. There are filmmakers who are maybe good at one segment, may not be maybe technically very sound, but he can't tell a story aesthetically, he can't tell a story interestingly, or the other way around. He can tell a story, but he doesn't understand the camera. This is the Hollywood strength of having the reserve bench is so strong. You can say the Spielberg, the Tarantino and all, but the other filmmakers are also coming up so well, so strong, that I see that in the next 50, 60 years, 100 years, no country can challenge Hollywood for that matter. So in that way, I'm a big fan of Hollywood. They're no nonsense. They make films of all genre, and they believe in excellence.
So you are idealizing Hollywood as a filmmaker.
Everybody does. Everybody, because this is the standard, this is the benchmark of filmmaking. Of course, the Parasite from South Korea has won Oscar. The Iranian filmmakers are making excellent films. South Korean filmmakers are making excellent films. And lots of people across. I was watching a Swedish TV production, Khilafat, which is on Netflix. Very well made, I would say. I'm not saying that Europe is not making. I'm not saying that the Asia is not making. Even in India, great films are being made. But well, if you talk about the quality and quantity put together in an optimum level, still it is unbeatable.
But money becomes a primary question.
Very important factor, because they have great producers who can really spend. If you see the Hollywood production, the kind of money they spend, the kind of the cameras they use, the kind of editing setup they have. So definitely investment, and in why they're investing, because they're getting the returns. Hollywood gives the return. So any industry, it is an industry after all. At one point of time, see, we are independent filmmakers. We are not part of the industry that way. When you become a commercial filmmaker, you got to give return to your producer. Otherwise, you don't get a second film. So they are giving the return globally, and that's why people are investing after them. So any industry, there is no point in saying that, well, Hollywood has got so much, so had we got it. You don't have, because you have not been able to give the result. You give result, tomorrow 20th Century Fox will come and produce you also. So they are people who have given results, and they are deserving people.
And what are the other projects that you have right now?
I'm making a feature film called FIR. Basically, it is going on right now, and a first phase has been shot in February. I was scheduled to shoot the next in the March, but unfortunately the COVID situation happened, and I'm planning.
Where on the cast of this film?
Well, Rita Datta Chakraborty is there, Lavli Moitro, and then lots of other.
They are eminent filmmaker. They are eminent actor and actresses in West Bengal.
More or less, they are known faces in Tollywood.
What are the other projects that you have right now coming up?
Two projects. One, the feature that is basically underway, I should say, already started. And one short film that I have written a story on COVID, basically a thriller on COVID, and then I'm going to shoot it in November, trying to shoot it in November.
What's your take on the budgetary allocations for the films that you're going to make?
All the projects are crowdfunded.
So what's your take on the future of filmmaking in West Bengal and the future of filmmaking in Balurghat?
I would say that the future looks bright, because West Bengal is a land of culture that the Kindináspur and Balurghat do. You don't have any dearth of talents here. You got to have actors and actresses. You got to have singers, dancers, technicians, cinematographer, everything. So Bengal has a creativity of its own. So is the district. So I think that everything combined together, what we need basically is just some good packaging, smart storytelling, without getting too much. No slow narrative will do, because nowadays people have options. The OTT platforms are basically bombarding you with the options. Now, if you expect that you will tell your story, your kind of a story, and people are bound to listen to it, no, it's basically buyer's market. You have to tell your story in a manner which Not only it must carry your message,
Mm.
but at the same time it has to be acceptable and interesting to the people.
Okay.
So this combination has to be there. There cannot be a judged attitude of, well, I'm so and so, I make a film, everybody has to watch. Nobody is going to watch.
Okay.
They have options.
Mm.
So if the directors keep these things in mind, can write good stories, can tell a good narratives, the other subcomponents, other factors, other ingredients are there to cook up a good food.
So do you think that this platforms like Netflix and this Amazon Prime, they're actually increasing people's interest in watching films?
Absolutely. This OTT platform must really done a wonderful job, because everybody every day is probably watching one film nowadays. So this has been a tremendous boost for the industry.
Okay, and the final question, that do you have any suggestion for the American and European students who be watching this interview, would be interested in making films based on the local regions of the local issues?
My only observation on this thing is that it's a small world, it's a global village. Wherever you are in America, you may not necessarily you are based in Washington, New York, and Los Angeles. You may be in a remote corner of America. You have opportunities galore. Try to explore the local resources. Try to tell good stories with all limited camera and other technical resources that you have. If you have a good story to tell, if you have good actors to portray, don't really bother about the technical issues first. Once you start doing things, things will fall in line automatically.
Okay.
So be a good filmmaker, first try to be a good storyteller. Tell the story, people will love it.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for this wonderful time that we are having, and thank you for the interview.
Thank you so much.